ways. Isn't that true? God can bring about his will in very surprising ways. He doesn't follow our reasoning or our logic when it comes to the way he works in the world and in our lives. As someone once said, God writes straight with crooked lines. He writes straight with crooked lines. It's nearly impossible, I think, to anticipate what God can do and how he will do it and when he will do it. Take the story of Joseph, the classic story that brings the book of Genesis to an end. Joseph, we know, was sold into slavery by his brothers who were jealous of him because he had the favor of his father. He ended up first as a slave in Egypt, then he rose through the ranks to become a governor, and one of his responsibilities was to dispense food during a time of famine. Well, when that famine struck also the area of Israel, people from there went down to Egypt, which had a large abundance of grain in store. And it just so happens that Joseph's brothers came to Egypt as well to get food. And what they didn't realize is that the person they have to deal with is their long-lost brother, who they betrayed. You know, this was the opportunity for Joseph really to take revenge on them, to exact retribution for what they had done to him years earlier. But instead, he shows mercy to them. He gives them the food they need. And through a little trickery, he will end up revealing himself to them, and we'll hear that in tomorrow's first reading. But through a strange turn of events, Joseph brings his brothers to be reconciled to him and to God through his own misfortune. Isn't it interesting how God worked through the life of Joseph and his brothers? In the gospel, we see how Jesus is at work. It's really a mystery to many people, maybe all of us, why Jesus chose certain men to be his apostles. We don't know much about them, but they were a very mixed group with a very kind of mixed record. Again, God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? Through this diverse group of common people, Jesus establishes the foundation of the church and transformed these men into powerful leaders. Could anyone have imagined that things would have turned out the way they did? Would any of those men have guessed what God had in store for them? So again, God works in mysterious ways. If we apply this truth, this reality to our own lives, we have to say, it's difficult sometimes to figure out how God is working in our lives through the events, through the challenges that confront us. We may sometimes wonder what our purpose is and how our small lives fit into the bigger plan of salvation. And that's okay. We don't have to have those answers. We're simply called to be faithful to the gospel, to be people of prayer, to stay close, to stay open to God's will. Because in his own way, God works his purposes through us. Someday, when we are standing in his presence and in the presence of all God's people, we will understand why things happened the way they did. Then we will finally comprehend the mysterious ways